Hello and welcome back. The cocoa trade in Côte d'Ivoire has created many problems, and it's linked to the country's 2002 civil war. A civil war which divided the country into the rebel-held north and the government-controlled south. In the government-controlled zone, the conflict is over land, and this area of the country has seen much bloodshed over the past few years, a considerable amount of which was characterized by violence against immigrant farmers by indigenous Ivorians and government-backed militias, who claimed the immigrants were forced Nouvelle sympathizers. But others say this conflict is about driving the immigrants from their land in order to take control of their lucrative cocoa plantations.
Leaving the town of Man, we drive south along what is known as the Death Road due to the high incidence of hijackings. It's night, the most dangerous time to travel, and our driver is clearly nervous. It's a few hours before the lights of the cocoa belt town of Derkway appear on the horizon, and a welcome relief when they do. Here in the west of Ivory Coast, a number of government-backed militias are in charge. Control of the areas of cocoa plantations has long been a source of tension between the indigenous Ivorians and immigrant farmers, mostly from neighbouring Burkina Faso.
I think if there's one story that is worthy particularly of attention in the Ivorian cocoa fields, it is this story of ethnic conflict, a conflict that's affecting thousands and thousands of people on a daily basis. It's the fact that there's a very important cash crop there that of course adds to the tensions surrounding the land question. And cocoa is referred to as the brown gold of Ivory Coast. It's a very, very prized commodity.
This is Nikla, a now officially closed displaced persons camp on the outskirts of Giglo, set up to deal with the thousands of mainly Burkinabe immigrant farmers who were driven from their plantations.
I'm a farmer. I cultivate cocoa. When the war started, the soldier took everything. My wife and children were beaten, and 2 workers were killed on my plantation. We had to leave by night. We walked for 2 months in the bush to arrive here. We've lost everything.
Over the past few years, a number of Nikla residents have returned to their plantations. While this has sometimes been successful, often the returning immigrants have been met with hostility by the indigenous Ivorians now occupying their farms. Because of this, approximately 700 people are still occupying Nikla. But with the camp officially closed, the residents get no support at all from the authorities, which leaves them destitute. To make matters worse, the government has begun forcibly returning the remaining inhabitants, and this has frequently led to disaster. This is Koma. Only days before we arrived, he had been badly beaten in the town of Bioway after government soldiers forcibly returned him to the farm he once owned.
It is when we got to the cocoa plantation that the problem started. The people from the village didn't approve. They had wooden sticks and stones. The young people blocked the road with big pieces of wood to stop people from passing. They used stones to hit us. It hurts. My whole body is sore.
The situation in this part of the country is so tense, it has one of the highest concentrations of UN soldiers in Ivory Coast. The United Nations operation in Côte d'Ivoire has 11,000 personnel. It is the 5th largest UN peacekeeping mission in the world. The UN has made considerable strides towards national peace, but in the West, where the issue of control of the cocoa plantations is so explosive, the organization has had to tread very carefully and mediate from the sidelines.
It's not safe. Recently there is violence, especially last Tuesday. I'm not a prophet, I can't predict, but I wish for the best for Ivory Coast.
Later that night, we joined the UN peacekeeping patrol with a battalion from Benin. We wanted to go to the town of Bioway and speak to the residents and hear their side of the story. From Giglo, we head west towards the Liberian border. The UN soldiers peering into darkness before us, on a lookout for hijackers or other possible threats. Finally, we reached the town of Biaway, where Coma had been attacked a few days earlier. The soldiers were clearly nervous and surrounded the vehicles defensively. We asked them whether we can go into Biaway itself. However, after some discussion, we were told this would be too dangerous.
It's the most sensitive area in the region. If a problem happens, it is likely that it will start from here.
After our failed attempt to visit Biaway with the UN, locals told us that the only safe way to get into the town was with the militia who unofficially control the region. So next day we visited the warlord, Maho Gloffier, leader of the 15,000-strong Front for the Liberation of the Great West. Gloffier granted us permission to go to Biaway and gave us his second-in-command, Gaboha Yao Yao, as an escort. In the village, we met several indigenous farmers. They described to us a violent confrontation which they claim took place the week before, when government soldiers tried to return the immigrant farmers to their plantations.
They said they would force us to accept the Burkinabe back in. They started to beat a woman and some young people. The army started shooting at us. They said they were going to force us, and that's what they did.
The men show us some of the injuries they claim they sustained at the hands of government soldiers as they attempted to block the return of the immigrants. Then they take us to a nearby bridge, the site of the conflict.
The army started to shoot at us because we are defending our plantations. The prefect gave the orders to shoot. They shot in the air and then the army shot in our direction. We were beaten with wood pieces by the soldiers. This woman also was beaten.
On the way back, we passed 4 Burkinabe immigrant farmers who are currently living within the community and working for the indigenous Ivorians. They are paraded as an example of how well everyone gets along here. However, our guide, Anja Bois, tells a different story.
They're afraid because they are here in a village with indigenous who are armed and who are very angry.
We are not against the Burkinabe. We just want to prevent them going to the plantations.
With cocoa farming providing an income that's huge compared to what can be earned from other crops, it's not surprising these indigenous farmers are so reluctant to hand back the plantations they now control. But until a sustainable resolution can be found, the residents of Nikla can only wait.
When I think about my plantation, it's been 4 or 5 years since it's been gone. I can't really be optimistic. I don't have a destination. My future has already been destroyed.
The chocolate industry is worth $80 billion a year worldwide. We asked Mike Davis of Global Witness what the industry is doing to address the issue of cocoa coming from conflict zones.
Industry is showing absolutely no integrity on this, which makes it very difficult to reach any conclusion other than that until they're absolutely forced to confront this. They will do nothing, which is disgraceful, but not necessarily entirely surprising.
It is nothing to do with it. And so the question whether we are complicit, I think, is what you're probably trying to get at in some sort of humanitarian rights abuses, is simply not right. Global Witness have got this completely wrong. They've just come straight in against the sector because we're a cheap shot for them. And it's very easy to try and make headlines.
We think it's absolutely essential that the cocoa industry displays a bit of leadership, takes some responsibility, and looks at ways that they can break this vicious cycle.
Is the chocolate trade influencing the current political crisis in Côte d'Ivoire?
No.
Once the West African economic success story, Ivory Coast is now one of the poorest nations in the world, 166th out of 177 countries on the Human Development Index. Cocoa is the lifeblood of Ivory Coast, but greed for this precious commodity continues to be an obstacle to the reunification of the country and exacerbates human rights abuse. With business continuing as usual, the road to lasting peace and stability here will be a long one.
And global market conditions will not be helping the situation in Côte d'Ivoire much. The price of cocoa hit a 23-year high last month due to supply problems. And unfortunately, the more lucrative the cocoa, the more it will be fought over. That's it for this edition of People and Power. If you'd like to comment on this film or any other matter, we'd love to hear from you on our usual address, aljazeera.net/English. That's it from me. And until next time, goodbye.